Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The House of 60 Fathers, and we're finally on the chapter, The House of 60 Fathers. Tien Pao has been able to get on a train, a freight train, to leave the town that is under siege by the Japanese. Unfortunately, the passenger train, something happened to the engineer, and it was backing up, and those people were probably captured by the Japanese. However, that gave way for the freight train to be able to leave the station. The House of 60 Fathers. There was no support in the open doorway of the rolling train. In the night, the soldier, making room for himself, squatted down, squeezed the tall basket tightly between his knees, and placed both hands in a hard grip on the rim of the basket. In the basket, Tien Pao had fallen asleep in a queer, uncomfortable, scrunched-up position. His legs straddled Glory of the Republic. His hands were on the little pig's head. He was almost sitting on the little pig. Glory of the Republic squirmed and wriggled. In the deep dark of night before the dawn, the train swayed and rocked as it leaned around around the tight curve of a mountain. In the rocking doorway, the basket teetered. The soldier's head nodded for a moment. His hands relaxed their hold on the rim of the basket. The train leaned around the curve. The basket leaned, squeezed from between the sleeping soldier's knees, leaned out still further, fell. Somehow it fell. It righted itself with the weight in its bottom. It fell on its bottom beside the speeding train. It bounced up, toppled over. It flung Tien Pao out beside the pounding wheels. Later, the jumping basket spilled out Glory of the Republic. It rolled away. Something under the train caught it and dragged it along. In the doorway, the soldier woke up with a start. The basket was not in the doorway. He leaped to his feet. He clutched the edge of the swaying doorway. There was a black mountain, and there was the night. The mountain echoed to the rolling of the train, but the mountain also beat back the sound of a basket being shredded to pieces under the train. Not a muscle moved in the soldier's face as he stared down at the beating wheels, and then he shrugged and turned his head away. The stunned Tien Pao crawled beside the train in the black darkness. He rolled himself away from the thundering wheels of the speeding train before he actually knew what had happened. Then he remembered the basket. The basket was gone. The train had gone around the bend. Even the sound of the train was gone, but Tien Pao still crawled beside the track. And as he crawled, he placed his hand on the shredded bottom of the basket. He held the pieces up to his eyes, stared at it, uncomprehending, unbelieving. He thinks that his pig was still in the basket. And they are just out there by themselves again. It seems like every time someone comes along to protect them, something happens and they get separated. They really have a terrible luck. A confused grunt came out of a deep ditch beside the track. Tien Pao flung the piece of basket from him, dived headfirst into the black ditch. There at its narrow bottom lay Glory of the Republic on his back, legs kicking in the air. He was caught upside down in the narrow ditch. He couldn't get up. He grunted his distress and his disgust. Tien Pao grabbed him and held him. He hugged and squeezed the upside-down, kicking, grunting pig. Suddenly, Tien Pao pinched Glory of the Republic's snout tightly shut. He heard voices. The night wasn't quiet anymore. Sounds of voices came down the track. Dim, dark shapes came stumbling along over the railroad ties. Tien Pao slid down flat with the little pig in the dark ditch bottom. More voices sounding. A mass of people came slowly round the bend. They struggled along under the weight of their belongings. These must be the poor who had evacuated Hanyang on foot when first the cannon had begun to thunder. They must have been walking for days to get this far. They trudged by. Women holding babies stopped by under the load of their household goods. Older children lugged younger children along. Some of the men were carrying an old father or mother piggyback, and to the backs of the old ones, high towering bundles had been strapped. They struggled by. The night became alive with their voices. In a way, it was good to lie at the bottom of the ditch, listening to many voices, to hear women and children talk out, their voices not hushed with fear. It meant that the Japanese had not yet reached this part of the country. But that meant that now at last he too was free. Free. The sudden thought overwhelmed Tien Pao. He was free. He almost wanted to run to the people, yell at them. He was alive and free, and the Japanese had not got him. He did not go. He stayed flat in the ditch, for among the voices he also heard children's voices in the dark. Children whimpering to their mothers for food. He couldn't run to these hungry, homeless people. They would seize Glory of the Republic. He was food. And even if little children swept from hunger in the night, Glory of the Republic too had to be free, alive and free. But day was beginning to dawn. The first faint gray was beginning to streak the sky, and long before daylight really came, somebody in the endless stream of marching people would for no reason stumble to the edge of the ditch and discover him and Glory of the Republic. Tien Pao looked up at the mountainous high rock looming up back of the ditch. These were his own people, but he couldn't stay in the ditch, nor follow the railroad track with them. For the sake of Glory of the Republic, he would once more have to take to the mountains. When for the moment there were no voices above him on the track, Tien Pao crept noiselessly up the far side of the ditch. Hugging the deep shadows of the towering rock, he crept around the huge, sprawling, rock-strewn base until it was between him and the railroad track. In the darkness, Tien Pao peered up at the tall, somber rock. He poked about for a path. There did not seem to be a path, but he could not stay down below, and he did not dare wander farther from the railroad track. If he started to wander in this unknown country, he might blunder and circle back to the Japanese lines. The railroad track had to be his guide. It was the only thing to give him some sense of direction. He would have to follow it the way he'd followed the river. He'd hide on top of the rock, wait until the stream of people had passed, and then he'd set off down the track by himself, wherever it led him. It struck Tien Pao that it might even be better if there was no path up the sheer, steep rock. Hungry people did not climb useless, pathless rocks, but if he could somehow climb it, then he would be safe all day. He'd be looking down on the people, but they wouldn't be able to see him. Then a thought hit Tien Pao so hard it all but rocked him. It unnerved him, but it could just possibly be his father and mother might easily be among these homeless wanderers on the track. Yes, it could be. He had reached this point in one night on the train, but these people on foot must have walked days and nights to get this far. These must be some of the first refugees from Hanyang. It could be. They could be among them. If the guerrilla chief had been right when he said that a father would wait and mother would not leave until the Japanese bayonets were at her back, why then his father and mother would not even be among these first refugees. They would still be coming. And from the top of this high rock, he could watch for them all day. Almost frantic now to get to the top to watch the tracks for his father and mother, Tien Pao began the struggle up the almost sheer wall of rock. He dragged Glory of the Republic up after him by the rope. He wouldn't give up, and he couldn't stop, no matter how much the little pig dragged and struggled against the impossible ascent. Tien Pao fought on, had to fight on, for other thoughts were crowding in among those first hopeful thoughts. He couldn't let himself think these other thoughts, that his father and mother might have gone by some other road. There must be other roads out of Hengyang, but that there was hardly a chance that they just happened to come down this particular track. Oh, he had to get up there and watch what else was there. If he did not find them, he was not really alive and free. He was lost and homeless. Suppose tonight he did climb down and follow the railroad track. Where would he go? Where in all of China would he go? Where in all China was he to find his father and mother? And then what would become of him? Lost, homeless, starving, lost. He had to climb, had to watch, and they had to come down the railroad track. There was no other hope. At last, Tien Pao pulled himself and Glory of the Republic over the top of the towering crag. He was spent. Trembling with exhaustion, hunger, he stretched flat and peered down at the railroad track. It was strange. He could hear the constant mutter of their voices, but he could not seem to see the people down below. Dazed with weariness, sick with hunger, he lay staring down, but everything was spotty. Everything danced. Big black balloon spots floated between him and the people on the railroad track. They closed in. He could not see through them. It had taken so long to climb, the sun was already hot on his back. Tien Pao closed his eyes to clear them of the dancing and the lilting and the spots. If you remember, he had this before when he was really hungry. The warmth of the sun on the tall rock stole over Tien Pao, and he fell asleep. Glory of the Republic rooted among the sparse grass and weeds, but then the tired pig cuddled down beside Tien Pao. In his sleep, Tien Pao threw a protective arm over his little pig. Together, they slept their exhausted sleep. Down below, the voices in the endless procession of the homeless along the railroad track muttered on and on. Tien Pao slept on. Sunshine spilled over the great rock. The evening sunshine lay warm against the face of the rock. Tien Pao awoke. In the evening hush, a bugle had called. It called again. One bugle called from somewhere far away, but the fantastic rock on which Tien Pao lay took up the call and cast it back. It was as if bugles sang everywhere. But a bugle, soldiers, the Japanese. But then Tien Pao let himself sink sweetly back as he remembered he was in free country. These couldn't be Japanese. The bugle call must come from some Chinese barracks. Tien Pao wasn't fully awake yet. He stretched and rolled over on his back, looked at the sun. He struggled to arrange his sleepy thoughts. The sun was still rising. He hadn't slept too long. Now he must go and watch the railroad track for his father, mother, and baby sister. Once more, Tien Pao stretched himself and yawned. He still felt warm and soft and confused. He looked at the sun again, but the sun was wrong. The morning sun had been behind the rock when he had climbed, but this sun shone from across the railroad track. He couldn't believe it. He reached out to shake the sleeping pig awake. Beyond the pig stood shoes. 2 pairs of feet in heavy shoes. In one scared jump, Tien Pao grabbed Glory of the Republic and was up and away on a stumbling run. In his confusion, he would have run headlong over the edge of a cliff, but a hand reached out and grabbed him. Tien Pao twisted in the man's grip, but he was white. Both men were white. They were soldiers, American soldiers. Tien Pao let himself droop and hang in the soldier's hold. He was limp with relief. "Ah, you spoiled it," one of the Americans said to him. He tapped a small black box he held in his hand and looked disgusted. Tien Pao did not know what he had said. He did not know that the little black box was a camera and that the soldiers had gone to the trouble of climbing that fantastic rock to take a picture. On top of the rock, they had come upon a Chinese boy cuddled around a pig, both sound asleep. It had been too good to miss. The soldiers made a lot of motions, grinned a lot, and at last Tien Pao understood that he was supposed to lie down again and snuggle up to Glory of the Republic. He did what they wanted for some, he did what they wanted, but he nervously watched them from under his eyelids for some explosion or red flash to become flaming out of the box. The soldiers were pointing at him. Nothing happened. The other soldiers set Tien Pao back on his feet. It was all over. Nothing had happened. I think Tien Pao doesn't understand a camera. He didn't know what, but there was nothing. Tien Pao stood bewildered, but both soldiers now seemed very pleased. They patted Tien Pao's head, and one reached into his pocket and gave Tien Pao a wafer-thin slice of candy. The thin strip of candy was wrapped in green paper with another wrapper of silver paper underneath the green. It puzzled Tien Pao. This surely must be extra wonderful candy if the Americans had taken such pains to wrap so small a piece so thoroughly. Tien Pao put the candy in his mouth. It lay, sweet and thin on his tongue, but it did not melt at all. He took it out again to look at it, turned it over. It stuck to all his fingers. Tien Pao stuck his fingers in his mouth to tear the candy off with his teeth, but the moment it was in his mouth, it did not stick at all. The two soldiers were laughing. They pointed to their teeth and made a chewing motion. Tien Pao began to chew. He chewed and chewed, but the stuff simply would not chew away. At last, Tien Pao just gulped and swallowed it. He rubbed his stomach to show the friendly soldiers how good it had been. They roared with laughter. Tien Pao did not laugh. What was he chewing? What is something that is wrapped in a lot of paper, and it's very thin, and when you put it in your mouth, it becomes sticky, but then when you chew it, it does not go away. It was chewing gum. One of the soldiers looked at a watch bound to his wrist. He spoke quick words to the other soldier, and then they hastily strode away along the cliff and started to descend on the other railroad side. Tien Pao was amazed. There was a path up the craggy rock, but in the dark, he'd missed it. The two soldiers slithered and groped their way down the steep path on their hard shoes. Tien Pao looked down at Glory of the Republic. The green wrapper of the queer candy lay at his feet. He stooped to pick it up. A lonely, starved, lost feeling welled up in Tien Pao. The hunger hit him so fiercely. It must be the strange candy in his stomach had awakened all of his terrible hunger. It had put his stomach on fire. He was sick all over with hunger. Tien Pao dropped the green wrapper, picked up Glory of the Republic, and silently started after the descending soldiers. He was sick, dizzy. Big ballooning blotches swept up before his eyes again. He had sense enough left to drop down on hands and knees and the steep path to keep from falling headlong down the towering rock. He heard himself make a queer noise, and then he blacked out. When Tien Pao came to again, one of the soldiers was holding him in big, steady arms and carrying him down the steep path. It felt good to be held. Tien Pao had wanted to lie back, shut his eyes, but where was Glory of the Republic? He must not be left behind. Tien Pao made sounds. He motioned that he saw that the other man was coming on behind, carrying Glory of the Republic. He closed his eyes. It was good to let go with the huge arms holding him. He'd slept all day, but he was so terribly sleepy. Well, we're going to stop here for the day, but here's a picture of him with the American soldiers carrying him and Glory of the Republic down the mountainside. Well, that was certainly interesting. Do you think Tien Pao is going to find his parents? If he goes with the Americans, he no longer is going to be able to watch all the people on the path. But if he stays in the mountain at the top, he's going to starve. And he can't see anything anyway because he's so hungry. Well, we'll find out in the next section, I hope. And we hopefully will find out the meaning of the title of the book, The House of 60 Fathers. Bye-bye.